Dude, I just got this super sick new television, 60-inch Sony, yo! What is the world's biggest indoor dirt field, Dodge and Chrysler engines, and indeed this huge $4,000 when new television from Sony have to do with Volkswagen? Well, today we are going full-on nerd on the Volkswagen Westmoreland, Pennsylvania factory. I am so excited to genuinely nerd out on this. Don't be a knuckle dragger or a dweeb. Get some SoloWerks suspensions for your sick ride, bruh. Dweeb, delinquent. Even those guys know. SoloWerks, for all your suspension needs, get your K2 or your Trek Edition Mark III looking nice and low and riding tight, brah! The story begins in the mid-70s in Germany. The Beetle, the Type 4, these were aging products for Volkswagen, and they knew that the Rabbit was going to be the future. The Passat was being produced in Emden, Germany, but what to do about America? Well, there had not been a foreign car manufacturer since Rolls Royce in the 1920s producing in America, but Volkswagen decided now was the time. The German executives flew over, met a bunch of states. Does this sound like Amazon with their new headquarters? It is exactly the same thing. Which state had the best people, the best facilities, and of course the best tax incentives? Well, after meeting with Governor Schaap, can we imagine what that meeting was like in the 70s? I like to think big fat cigars, maybe some alcohol, maybe some scantily clad women or something, but then again, that was the 70s, so that was probably just a Tuesday. Pennsylvania was steel country. Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, this was coal land, steel world, but it had left the 60s, the 70s, and going into the 80s, that was the downturn time. In fact, Chrysler had planned to build a factory there in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania in the 60s. They even built the roof. They didn't put any concrete down, they didn't put walls up. So it was the world's largest dirt floor with a roof over it. And they abandoned it basically. So yet another blow to Western Pennsylvania. But that is the plant that Volkswagen bought. Now, when I say bought, did they go along with 1,000,000 Deutschmarks or their local currency exchange to get to dollars? No, well, not entirely. They bartered. Much like a Craigslist advert, they ended up swapping Rabbit engines to Chrysler for part of the factory. So if you've ever wondered why those 1.7 liter Volkswagen Rabbit and 4-speed manual transmissions are in the Dodge Omni and the Plymouth Horizon, Plymouth's not even a thing anymore, that is why. It looks like a Rabbit, the Dodge Omni, but it has nothing to do with Volkswagen except Volkswagen owed Chrysler a bunch of money, so that's where that engine came from. So 1976, hier ist der Motor, wo ist meine Factory, bitte, Chrysler? That was it, done. So the Germans came over, concrete was put down. Part of the agreement with Pennsylvania is that a lot of the employees would come from the local areas near Pittsburgh. Westmoreland County is just about 20 miles east of Pittsburgh. But they did put out a national hiring request, and executives came in from Detroit and anywhere else that car people were car people. Indeed, someone that I'm very happy to call a friend is Morgan Barclay. He has been so insightful and sharing with the experiences of being one of the hires before the plant had any concrete on the ground, and he ended up being one of the head people in the body shop. This is the best backdrop ever. These are old VHS cassettes that I've collected over the years, and now I finally get to watch them in all of their VHS glory. Wait, did it just end? Okay, let's go to the next cassette. To quote Morgan, because he has literally written out pages of phenomenal information that we need to preserve and keep. One of the VW impressions that has left etched in my mind and career was the first time my boss and I toured the interior of the new plant. As we entered, all you would see was dirt and dust, construction equipment, cement trucks, and laborers. Let that sink in for a moment, and then understand that where I was standing a year and a half later, we would be producing cars from the same dirt floor. It was hard getting my head around it. It was my first contact with automotive manufacturing. Then as we were finishing our tour, my boss took me over to the center of the plant to a well-lit area with a large plant layout. The plant layout board was laid out in 20-foot squares. Each square had a number assigned. To the side was a numeric list that defined each number by sequence date for concrete, tooling, setup, buy-off, and first run. I have to give a lot of love and respect to everyone that I've ever met that's worked there, but Morgan especially has just been so insightful for all of this, and some of my most prized things in my collection are from him. Volkswagen did send him to Germany. This is his actual original German to English translation book to learn from his Meister. He was taught in Wolfsburg how to weld and how to operate within the Volkswagen method and ways. Obsolete stickers from the factory. These are still used today. The OK stickers, you may see them on Hondas, Volkswagens, etc. This was to say sign off for each department. And then here it is, his own stamp, his own seal of approval. This is just priceless to me. Stamped and unstamped, it's just unbelievable. So thank you to him. And if I can somehow keep all of this alive and share videos that you find interesting on YouTube, you being the viewer, thank you for watching and wanting to learn, then that makes it all worth it, I think. But absolutely one of my favorite things is this. This is one of my most treasured possessions in my collection. This is the actual tool made and used inside the Volkswagen factory all over the world, and this one was Morgan's actual own one, and it is, well, do you know what it is? I'll give you a second. Okay, it is a body gapping tool. Every gap on a Mark I Rabbit can be measured by this. You can see the machining, and it even has the little metric 6.5, 0.2, 4.5 millimeters. I realize I might be a little bit too much of a Volkswagen nerd when having something like this makes me emotional. Just to think about the dozens of cars going through every couple of hours and being checked just fascinates me. And I recently worked on a brand new car. I did use it. It's actually completely functional. It's the bare minimum. All right, let's not nerd out too much on this, but again, there's just so much history, and to me, I want to keep that shared. So Morgan literally was in there when it was a dirt floor, and indeed I've collected press photos, etc. from that era. It's just absolutely amazing that yes, a year and a half later, 1978, the first US produced Volkswagen Rabbits rode off the production line.
It is a privilege and a distinct honor for me to present to our president, James W. McKernan, and to the world, the very first ever American-built Rabbit.
So, September 25th, 1977, this was the National Dealer Meetings. And yes, every manufacturer does these. They still happen to this day, but I'm pretty sure you're not getting a beer stein handed out in 2020. Hopefully we're a little bit more PC. Is this sanitary? Was this okay? 70s were a wild time. This was held in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, literally 10 miles east of where I am right now. Now, the very first ones weren't even produced in the factory. They were made in Germany, shipped over as plain bodies, and then the bodies were sent down the production line. And through Morgan's wonderful recollections again, a lot of the production line wasn't even assembled yet. So they would lift up the body, lift it to the next section, and continue it on. Morgan also says that when the very first Rabbit was completed, they had a little plaque, they gathered for a couple of minutes, took some photos, and then everybody went back off to work. Now, I don't have a photo of this. This is one of his prized possessions. But he did say that the cardboard sign was thrown into the trash, and he was walking by later, and he saved it for posterity. So thanks to him and to everybody else, because I have collected myself so many weird and fun things. This was I guess what, a candy bowl? It's not an ashtray, I hope, for the first Rabbit. So they were aware that this was a big thing. Again, the first foreign car manufacturer to produce on American soil since the 1920s. So the first Rabbits, the first 100 or so, were all white. They were the German-produced ones assembled there. But after that, it went through a gamut of models. The diesels, the 4-doors, the 2-doors. And a few years later, the Rabbit pickup truck was introduced. And then in 1983, finally, the USA got the Rabbit GTI.
Introducing the Volkswagen Rabbit GTI for America. It is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
See your Pacific Northwest Volkswagen dealer. Prices start at $62.90.
Yes, the Golf GTI Mark I had been produced in Germany since the 70s. Heck, even Canada got it in the 70s and early 80s. But this was the first time the GTI came to America. 1983, 1984. 1984, though, marked the end of the Mark I. And just to let Morgan's story continue briefly, he then left at the end of the Mark I and went to Harley Davidson. And that would be a recurring theme. People would come in from Harley, they would go back out to Harley, they would come in from General Motors, they would go out to Ford. There was a whole just revolving door, perhaps, of American automotive industry careerists cycling in and out. But yes, with 1985 did come the Mark II Golf. As you may know, the Westmoreland Golfs were different than the rest of the world. Not very different. You can interchange doors, etc. But that front panel from 1985 had the square headlights to match US regulations. It had to have sealed beamed headlights. There's those NHTSA or DOT regulations. That was only for American production though. So in Europe, those front ends are very sought after. Indeed, the tail lights are different. A lot of these different regulations, the front side markers, etc. But underneath, it was a normal Golf, just the same as its Wolfsburg German brethren. One anomaly with the 1985-1986 models is that the GTI never had the square headlights. It always had the rectangle headlights like the Jetta and the rest of the world. But 1985, let me get the date exactly right, November 14th, 1985, the BASF Corporation gives congratulations to the Westmoreland plant. Yes, they made 1 million cars from 1978 until 1985. And this is the actual plaque that hung in the factory. This is possibly the only one that we know of, made in Michigan and sent over to Pennsylvania. So yes, I am a nerd. Yes, I am very excited to have this. 1986 brought on the same headlights to all of the models. Everything continued okay. Sales went down a little bit. 1987 came. The Jetta was even produced there. Not many people realize that, but I guess when you have some spare factory production, you stick the extra Jetta in just to make that up. So, middle of 1988, Volkswagen did announce that the Westmoreland plant would be closing, and by the end of the year, that was it. There's a whole lot of discussion about why it ended. There's a whole lot of stories about what happened to some of the people, or indeed individual people towards the end. Let's try and keep this on a high note. Is there a high note for Westmoreland? Well, no, not for a couple years. 1989, the factory is sitting literally empty. Volkswagen has moved to Pueblo, Mexico with a new investment there. That plant is still operating today. All of the new Beetles were produced there for the world. But yes, Western Pennsylvania has no factory there. Well, they've got an empty factory that indeed Pennsylvania now owns. Volkswagen sold it to Pennsylvania because there was no other buyer. So it's not like Volkswagen alone said, no, this isn't good for us. It wasn't really good for anybody. 1990, thanks to a bunch of tax incentives and whatever other deals Pennsylvania did, Sony moved in. And yes, we're still showing Volkswagen videos, which Ralph and I are just absolutely loving the dress and attire and everything else that's going on in this. But Sony did buy it. Cathode ray televisions. That was the big thing. Let's keep building bigger and better ones for America. And I remember growing up in Europe, looking at the American TVs and being like, oh, it's the size of my bedroom. I could sleep in this thing. So behind me is a 2003, and this was it. If you were in 2003, this was the Mac Daddy. You went down to Circuit City. You went over to Best Buy with $3,999 in your pocket. You too could buy this television proudly produced in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. Now, $4,000. The first Rabbits made in 1978 were $4,000. Now, yeah, forget inflation. That's not fun for what I'm saying right now. Genuinely, the first Rabbits made and sold only a decade or two earlier were 4,000 and change. So Sony did make a go of it. They produced, I assume, because I really couldn't find figures on this, hundreds of thousands of televisions at $4,000 a piece for the flagship models. You can tell it's a Pennsylvania-made television because Sony handily have the same style sticker on the back of every one of their televisions. If it's made in Mexico, if it's made in Japan, etc. But this one does have Westmoreland, Pennsylvania, and that zip code, 15666. Is there ever going to be a core zip code than that? But like all good things, that too ended. Production there slowed down to a trickle, and then it went down to just doing repairs and went from thousands of employees to a couple of hundred, and Sony too moved out of Westmoreland. The factory again sat idle. No more dirt on the floors, but yes, that original great big roof with the walls and now the concrete that Volkswagen had put in. The factory does still stand today. In fact, you can go and visit it. Security may not like you driving in, but especially if you make a left off of Technology Drive. And that is something that has changed over the years. Volkswagen had a more Volkswagen sounding name, and then when Sony moved in, it changed to Technology Drive. Keep left at the fork, and then we turn onto 119, and it's just off the highway. So every time people are driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, you are just maybe 4 miles away from the old Westmoreland factory. In fact, you can tell when you're getting close to the factory because you're in a pretty rural area and suddenly there's this highway and you take a little exit, just a small little exit, and you're suddenly on a 4-lane road leading up to the gates of the factory out of nowhere. So yes, Volkswagen did impact that area significantly, and it still stands today. The factory is now owned by the RIDC, Regional Development blah blah blah, a Pennsylvania funded development program. So if you want to go, if you have a production company or something, you can go and lease warehouse space in the exact same building that was Chrysler's roof, through Volkswagen's concrete floors, through Sony's production facility. It's still available, it still stands to this day. I'm not joking, I literally have a VHS collection of Volkswagens. My museum is going to be amazing. This is the Jetta Trek advertisement, or actually this is the dealer training video, and it matches the Jetta Trek bike from 1997, and if you did not know how much of a nerd, the 1996 version, because they were different. But if you watch this video, you will be able to tell all about that, to know all about that. Oh, yeah. All right. This is probably another episode for another day. If you want to watch this, let me know down in the comments. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. Wash your hands, wash your cars, take care.